So you should have your Bibles open as well to Daniel chapter 7, because that's where we need to do this together at. And what I had wanted y'all to do in Daniel chapter 7, looking at verses 1 through 14, and also the interpretation in verses 15 through 28, is I was wanting you to find numbers that are used, including references to those numbers, and I wanted you to find symbolic elements that are used, including references. So it's not enough to say, well, I see the number 4. That was a hint. Okay, so you see the number 4. Where do you see the number 4? Okay, that's what I wanted y'all to do. I realize that some of y'all may not have had time to do that, so go ahead and get your pens going and your Bibles open and start working on that so that we can find some of the elements that are up here. Because we're looking at apocalyptic literature, and we've gone over numbers, and colors are often used. There's some other things as well that have symbolism in apocalyptic literature, and I want us to kind of flesh those out and pull those out of this text. This is the last class of the quarter with me, okay? Wednesday night, you'll be in here with Drew, or you'll be in the back with Ed, whichever your choice may be, but there won't be an intertestamental period class. This is the last one. So by the way, if you didn't get both sets of papers on the trolley, you need to get those this morning, because I'm packing that trolley away and it's gone. So if you're missing any papers, this is the morning to get caught up with those before they disappear. Limited time offer, okay? Limited time offer. All right, so hopefully everybody is there in Daniel chapter 7. Start giving me what you got. I am curious as to what you found. And remember, I said Wednesday night that we're not counting verse 1, okay? The first year. The first is not relevant for what we're doing this evening. It really started this morning. It really starts in verse 2. So what do we see in 2 and forward? Let's just keep this simple for now. Let's look for numbers. All right, 4 winds. Good. So what's our reference on that, Aaron? What's our reference? Yeah, the passage. Bible reference. Verse 2. Okay. So verse 2, we get the 4 winds of heaven. All right. So there's a number. All right. Not a symbolic element yet. We'll look at it. Other numbers.
Same verse, 4 beasts.
Same. It's the next verse. In this particular case, it's going to be verse 3. Okay. So verse 3, we have the 4 beasts. Okay, so there's another number, 4. All right, let's look down in the text. Keep going. We're in verse 4 now. See any numbers in verse 4? That's all I'm wanting you to do, is just go down the text and look for numbers that seem to have perhaps some kind of symbolic meaning.
3 ribs.
All right, we get 3 ribs down in verse 5. Good, that's a number. So on your sheets, you should write 3 and then verse 5, and you might want to write 3 ribs, verse 5, however you're looking at that. I will just say this, that in this particular case, 3 doesn't have the apocalyptic meaning that we're used to. What would be the normal apocalyptic meaning of 3? Divinity. By the way, I have no one yet to be my mic guy. Aaron, are you my mic guy? Aaron is my mic guy. Thank you, Aaron.
You got 7, you got 10 horns.
Okay, we'll get there in just a second. Let's deal with 3 first. All right, so we see the number 3. 3 usually in apocalyptic literature refers to the divine, to God, to deity. Okay, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In this particular case, it's talking about 3 ribs. Now, I will tell you it has meaning, but it doesn't have the usual apocalyptic meaning in that verse. Right? But you can put it there and reference there, but understanding that it's got a slightly different function here in this text. So we've got 3 there. Before we get farther down, are there any other numbers? Cynthia gave us one, but it's farther down in the text. I want to look, see if we see any others.
4 wings.
All right. Verse 6, 4 wings of a bird on its back. Okay. So 4 is a number that we've already seen in the text now twice. Okay, so that might have apocalyptic meaning. My suspicion is it may or may not in this text. Okay, but mark that on your papers. Okay, not every number has to have an apocalyptic meaning, but they do have a meaning. Okay, the 3 ribs have a meaning in the text. Rusty, what you got?
The 2 feet in verse 4, I guess those aren't.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for the mic.
2 2 feet in verse 4, maybe those 2 feet don't mean anything.
Verse 4, the what?
2 feet. No, the 2 there.
Oh, stand on 2 feet like a man. All right, so we'll write the number down. Okay, there's a number. I don't think it has any meaning except it's telling us what the beast is like. Okay, so it doesn't have an apocalyptic meaning. So we write 2 on there. What else? So we've gotten down to verse 6. We've got the 4 wings of the bird. The beast had 4 heads. Okay, so there's 4 again. Dominion was given to it. All right, so we have 4 wings and 4 heads. Again, I'm not thinking that those are apocalyptic. I think they mean something else. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But you're going down the text. Now you're in verse 7. We have our 4th beast, okay? We don't need to note that because we already noted the 4 beasts earlier. It has great iron teeth. Let's see. It has 10 horns, okay, at the end of verse 7. The number 10, does it have an apocalyptic meaning? It can. It can mean completion. Can it have a different meaning? It might mean 10. Okay, so mark that on your papers with a reference. All right. Out of that, then I think Cynthia got us to verse 8. There comes up another horn. Okay, that little horn comes up. 3 horns are plucked up by the roots, so you get a 1 and a 3. By the way, we've talked about this prophecy earlier in the class. Do y'all remember? Maybe. We did. We talked about Daniel's prophecies of the period. Okay, so we've actually been in this text before, and so you may remember from that what these horns are all about. By the way, when you write 10 over there, let's go ahead and hit the symbolic element that's used here as well. So right out there beside it, on that second column, horn. Because a horn has symbolic meaning. It's a symbolic meaning that goes all the way back into the Old Testament. Anybody know what it means? You got an idea what a horn might mean.
Strength or power.
Strength or power, exactly. Okay, and we see that well before there's anything that we can call apocalyptic literature. All right, this is something that you see as well in pagan depictions of their various gods, that they will often have horns. It designates power. That's a long way from our thinking because we don't think of horns as having power. But think about it. In an ancient context, in an ancient world, what would be one of the most powerful animals that you would come into contact with in the ancient world? I heard ox, bull. Okay. What's scary about a bull? Well, just run into a pasture sometime where there's a bull over there and it's got signs that say, "Don't go in my pasture." And you might discover what's scary about a bull. They're strong animals. There were animals in the ancient world. There was a kind of an ox in the ancient world called an auroch, A-U-R-O-C-H. These animals show up in cave paintings. Okay, so there are cave paintings in France that depict these particular animals. They only went extinct. They only went extinct in the modern period, I think in the Middle Ages. All right, but they used to inhabit all of the ancient Near East. There are some descendants of them that look a lot like them in India and places like that. They're wiped out in Europe and they're wiped out in the Middle East, but these are substantially larger than our cattle today. Okay, our cattle may have been domesticated from them, but they have these big horns. Think about a longhorn. Okay, horns symbolize power. They're coming off of powerful animals, and so it brought that symbolism into the Old Testament, in the ancient Near East as well. And you see that in apocalyptic literature. They symbolize power. What do these horns symbolize here? Remember from when we talked about this passage in class. Rulers, kings. Okay, they represent kings. Okay, so note that out there besides symbolic elements. All right, so let's see. We got 10. We got 3 that are thrown down. We got an 11th one that comes up. All right, so we're now in verse 9. So we're looking now at the Ancient of Days. Do we see any numbers there? 9 and 10 are the verses that we're looking at. What about 10? Do we see some numbers there? Holler it out real loud, Andrew.
The thousands and the 10,000 times 10,000.
Okay, 1,000 thousands and 10,000 times 10,000 stand before the Ancient of Days. By the way, who is the Ancient of Days here? Who is the Ancient of Days? God, okay? God the Father, God on the throne, okay? Someone else enters the picture in a little while who is also deity, but the Ancient of Days is God the Father. So you have these huge numbers who are serving him. 1,000 thousands and 10,000 times 10,000 are standing before him. All right, so Aaron, you're our math guy, right? You're a pilot. Surely you're a math guy as well. Calculating those numbers right? Rusty's a math guy, but he's an accountant. I don't know. Who's our math person in here? What is 10,000 times 10,000? Aaron's got his calculator out. Now we got a finance guy over here, right? Drew, I could call on you, any of our accountants, finance people. 10,000 times 10,000.
100 million.
100 million. So the point of the text is you've got 100 million serving before God, right? Wow, now we know the answer. When you're on Final Jeopardy, how many servants are before God in the throne room? How much was it, 100 million? 100 million. I'm getting a lot of blank looks. Is that what the number's about?
No.
No, what's the number about?
Just so much unlimited.
Okay, it's so much unlimited. The highest number in the ancient world, I believe, was 1,000 times 1,000. So 10,000 times 10,000 is beyond what can be numbered. But notice the use of tens. How many tens are there? Here we go. You got your calculator still out? How many tens do we have to divide it by to get 100 million? A lot. Okay, good. It's 10 million tens to get 100 million. Okay, see, I'm not a math guy, guys. You do not want me helping you with your math homework. That's when I sub in a math class and these kids come up and they don't know how to do this problem. I look at them, I said, I'm 55. I haven't done 7th grade math in 40 years. You do not want my help, because even if I could give you the answer, I would do it the way we learned, not the way you're learning. I'm not a math person. The point is lots of tens. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of tens. Okay? 10 being the number of what? In apocalyptic literature? Perfection, completion. Okay? So that's what you've got before the throne room of God, verses 9 and 10. All right, let's keep looking down. Verse 11, 12, 13, and 14. Do we see any numbers here? I don't know, Jeff, whether I'll accept it or not either.
Verse 12, that comment about belong for a season and a time, it's still a measurement, it's still an amount.
It is a measurement, but it's not a season and a time. So it's a shortened version of that. That's that 3.5. Okay, but it's a shortened version of that. I'm not sure that it carries meaning here as such, other than to tell us that it's a short period of time. So anything else down to verse 14? We haven't even got to the interpretation yet, which is fine because we're not going to. Okay? Now, let's go back, take your Bibles, and go back to verse 1. And now let's see if we can find some symbolic elements that are used in the text. So, we're going down verse 2, 4 winds of heaven. Okay, we haven't talked about wind as a symbolic element, but the fact that it's coupled with the number 4, which is a symbolic number in apocalyptic literature, 4 being the symbol of what? Earth. Okay, north, south, east, and west are 4 cardinal directions. We still talk about the 4 corners of the earth, right? Even though everybody in this room knows that there are not literally 4 corners of the earth, because the earth is what? Round, okay? Because the earth is round, it doesn't have corners, but we still talk about the 4 corners of the earth. And when I say that, when I talk about the 4 corners of the earth, what am I talking about? The whole earth, okay? The earth in its entirety. So we have 4 winds in this particular case, the 4 winds of heaven. What are the directions of the winds? North, south, east, and west. Those are our cardinal winds. Okay, I know the wind can come from any variation between those, but generally speaking, let's just face it, when you're in Texas, you know exactly what it means in February when we have a strong south wind, right?
Warm and wet.
It means warm and humidity. That's exactly right. So we get warmer air moving up from the Gulf. It's humid. And in February, we also get something else that comes with that nice south wind. Cedar pollen. And if you suffer with allergies, you know exactly what that means. I do not like south winds in January and February because that means, it's going to be warm, but that means that cedar fever is going to kick in from those trees down there in the hill country. If then you go to work in the morning and it's a nice warm breeze coming up out of the south, and you come home in the afternoon and now all of a sudden the wind is blowing from the north, what do you know has happened? A cold front has come through, so the temperatures are going to drop, the air is going to get drier. North and south are prevailing winds here in Texas. Other parts of the world, prevailing winds might be east and west. It just depends upon where they're situated geographically. So the four winds of heaven, all of the earth, okay, is what that is telling us. They're stirring up the great sea. We haven't talked about this, but the great sea there is also symbolic. And you might be saying right now, I don't know how it's symbolic. I love a nice vacation down at Galveston for a week, right? Some of you may even be dreaming right now of a vacation down on the coast to Galveston or Corpus or someplace like that, right? How do you feel when you stand at the edge of the sea?
Very small. Very small.
Very small, okay? I will tell you, I will walk out into the Gulf as long as my feet can touch the ground. If I can't touch the ground, I am not interested in going any farther into that water. Not just because I don't know how to swim. Lots of people drown in the ocean that are good swimmers. The ocean is a dangerous place. When you step into the ocean, you are no longer the apex predator. And if you think, well, I could go to the woods and I can always carry a .44 Magnum, and if a grizzly comes along, I can handle that, you'd be right. Try that with a shark. The ocean is a scary place. And the ocean was a scary place for ancient Hebrews. And so when you have this symbolism here of the great sea, and what comes up out of the great sea? In the vision, what comes up out of the great sea? The four beasts that are the focus of the vision. All right? That all symbolize the kingdoms of men that are coming down the road. Okay? So this great place of turmoil, this world, if you will, that is confusing and dangerous. And out of that world come these beasts that are terrifying and dangerous and scary coming up out of that. So the sea here has symbolic meaning. And by the way, you can go all the way back farther, much farther than apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature makes use of symbols that already have some meaning prior to that. So 7 has a meaning because God creates the world in 6 days and rests on the seventh, forming the full. 10 has a meaning long before there's apocalyptic because we're all born with 10 fingers and 10 toes, right? At least that's the goal. By the way, even if you don't have, even if you're not thinking about being born with 10 fingers and 10 toes, people still do that. I love this. Again, substituting for 6th grade and 7th grade kids, we used to learn the multiplication tables by heart. Some of you could probably still rattle them off. I bet I could ask Charlotte, and she could rattle off all the way times 9 times 10 and get all that entire table by memory because my generation learned that by memory. What I see kids doing is in math class, they're doing some funky things with their fingers, counting back and forth to get the answer. Fingers are very good for counting, right? We still do that. This is your one last chance. See, what am I doing? I'm pointing with a finger, okay? So fingers are significant. 10 is significant because we can count to 10 really, really easily. It's harder to count to 20 because you got to take your shoes off to get those other 10 digits. But 10, you can count that pretty easily on your fingers, all right? So they have symbols before that becomes apocalyptic. The ocean is a symbol before it's used in apocalyptic literature. It's a scary place, okay? It's a scary place, the ocean. All right, and you've got these kingdoms, these beasts that come out of the ocean. And by the way, every single one of those beasts is what kind of a kingdom? Human or divine? Human. Okay? I don't know of any biblical passage, and I could be wrong, and if I am, somebody will correct me. I can't think of any biblical passage where God's kingdom is pictured as coming from the sea. Where is God's kingdom usually pictured as coming from? From heaven down, okay? The clouds, the sky, okay? We talk about heaven being above us, right? We all know that literally is not true, right? Okay, it's because it's not spatial, okay? What would be, it's from perspective of the earth, all right? So you've got these earthly kingdoms that are coming up out of the ocean. That's not a good place, not a good thing. I know those of you that like the ocean, fine. But for most people, the ocean is a scary place. All right? It was interesting when Ivana and I were up in Boston a year and a half ago. We went to Gloucester to see the Fisherman's Memorial there. Anybody all ever seen that? It's like on the fish sticks box, okay? But it's really a serious memorial because it's a memorial for the Gloucester fishermen who have died at sea. Yeah, they all died back in the 1800s, right? Now, people still die at sea. Ships still overturn in storms, and those people are never found. There's no grave for them. The ocean is their grave. So the sea is still a scary place. All right, so what else do we have here? Elements. We have the great sea. We have the great beasts. The first of these beasts is like a lion with eagle's wings. But its wings are plucked off. And it's made to stand on 2 feet like a man. What kingdom is that? The first kingdom. It's a lion with wings. All right, it's Babylon. All right. What's our second beast? Okay, what's the animal? It's a bear. Okay. It's raised up on one side. It has 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it's told, arise, devour much flesh. What kingdom conquers Babylon? Persia. Okay. Go ahead and ask me, what are the 3 ribs about? I'm not 100% sure. Okay. I'm not 100% sure. Persia knocks off kingdoms. I'm not sure which 3 I would count to that. I could probably come up with 3 kingdoms that it knocks off. I'm not sure that's the point of that. Okay. What's the next beast after the bear? It's a leopard. How is that leopard described? 4 wings, 4 heads. Okay. So it's earthly. Compare a leopard to a bear. It's fast. Okay, it's not a cheetah fast, but it's still fast. Bears can run very quickly for a short distance. That's why you don't try to do what? Don't try to outrun a bear. Okay, don't try to outrun. You're not likely to have much luck with that. Okay, climb a tree for a bear, right? No, they can climb trees too. Your best bet's the 44 Magnum in your pocket, and then run. Okay. There's a joke about bears and firearms, but I won't share that with you here in class. You can ask me later. But a bear's kind of a lumbering creature, and that's kind of the way the Persian Empire lumbered along and took everything over. But then you got this leopard, and we think speed, we think sleek, right? And he's got 4 wings. What can you do with 4 wings? You can fly, and if you got 4, you can probably fly really fast. And he's got 4 heads. I'm not sure the wings there and the heads are really about how fast he moves. The leopard probably is. What are the 4 about? What is that kingdom? Tell me that kingdom, and then we'll understand the 4. It's Greece. But Greece is in 2 parts, isn't it? Remember? We did all that history for a reason. Remember Alexander the Great? He's the leopard. He conquers. He conquers quickly. So he takes the entire Persian Empire in a matter of years. And he goes all the way to India. And he dies at the ripe old age of 33. After having conquered and established the largest empire the ancient Near East had known up until that point in time. And then when he dies, what happens to his empire? It breaks apart into 4. Very good. Okay. I know sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 3, but generally speaking, it breaks down into 4 when the dust settles. 4 heads, 4 wings. So this beast describes very well Greece. But Daniel doesn't know about Greece, does he? This is what's future for him. It's past for us. All right. Then our 4th beast is what? What's our 4th beast? It's Rome. What's he described as? Terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong, great iron teeth. Okay? This guy doesn't have just teeth. He's got teeth made out of iron. Okay? Does that scare you? Should. Terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. Okay? It conquers these kingdoms and brings something new. How powerful was Rome? It was exceedingly powerful. Okay? You did not mess with Rome lightly. And you did not rebel against Rome lightly. Okay? The only equivalent I can give, I know Texans like to talk, there used to be these bumper stickers, secede, right? Meaning let's go back to being a republic. Nice thought. I wouldn't want to be in Texas when the full might of the military coming from the other 49 states is turned on us. You don't rebel against the United States lightly. You don't secede from the United States lightly. Okay? It's not likely to end well for the person that does that. Because the United States is an exceedingly strong country from a military standpoint. Rome was that kind of a country. And so when you have the Jews that rebel against Rome, they will hold them off for a while, but in the end their country is going to be devastated. Ask, if you ever get a chance, ask the zealots at Masada how it ended for them. They might say, wish we had stayed home instead of rebelling against Rome. I don't know what they would say. But Rome was that kind of a beast. So you have the horns here, by the way, from the interpretation that we did earlier in the class. What are the horns? They're coming up out of that beast. What are they? Rulers. Specifically, who would they be? Emperors. All right? Emperors. And that 11th one then, who is noted particularly, what would he be? Who would he be? Who's our 11th emperor of Rome? Domitian is, okay? And Domitian is the emperor who wages war against the saints in the book of Revelation. So you see in this particular text, in this particular vision, a fast forwarding to what's going to happen at the end of the New Testament period. All right, I make the point that when you look at Daniel chapter 2, for example, remember the vision there, you have the statue. What are the 4 kingdoms of the statue, by the way? The exact same 4, okay? And then you see a stone that shatters the image, becomes a great mountain and fills the whole earth. Sometimes what we do is we take Daniel chapter 2 and we say it's fulfilled and finished on the day of Pentecost. That's not accurate. When is Daniel 2 fulfilled? My interpretation is it's fulfilled when the church overcomes the Roman persecution. That is when the war ends. That is when the statue is destroyed. Okay? So we need to be careful not to limit the scope of the visions too much. All right, so we've spent a lot of time in Daniel chapter 7. There may be some other elements here. By the way, lots of elements in verses 9 and 10. Okay, particularly verse 9, the second half. How is God described there? His clothing is white as snow. The hair of his head like pure wool. Remember, we read that with our eyes closed. Well, your eyes were closed, mine were open because I was reading it. His throne is made out of fiery flames. Wheels were burning fire. So you get colors here, right? What are those colors meant to impress upon us? Purity, if you look at white, okay? Wool, I love that. Is God at least pictured in apocalyptic images? Is he bald like me? No, he's got a head of curly, woolly hair, okay? Throne is made out of fiery flames. Wheels are burning fire. Think about the images that Ezekiel sees when he sees God's war wagon in Ezekiel chapter 2. Okay, a lot of similarities here in those two passages. So you have colors as well, sights, smells. When you look at the book of Revelation, you have smells, right, as well that are being used. Apocalyptic literature pulls all of that in and uses all of that. It is panorama. It is meant to impress upon us visually and with our senses, okay? Not just with our eyes, but with our senses as well. And that's something that when you read the book of Revelation, look for that. Part of the problem, again, is when we read the book of Revelation, we don't always visualize that because we're not very visual people anymore, are we? Well, we are, as long as it's on a screen, not in our minds. The application I gave Wednesday night was, how many of y'all have recently listened to a baseball game on radio? There was a time when that was the only way you could listen to a baseball game. There wasn't television. And so people that were used to doing that would know, okay, well, he's on first and he's on third, and they would know that. They would remember that. We're so far away from that, quite honestly. When I watch a baseball game on TV, I have to keep looking at the score thing at the bottom to see what the score is because I can't remember. This is a curse of modern society, is that our memories are shorter because we're used to having all of that right there in front of us. And so you take that away, it's a little hard to visualize these things. All right, so Daniel chapter 7, if I can pull it up. Daniel chapter 7, Revelation chapter 13. I just want you to, at some point in time, compare the two beasts there, the fourth beast and the sea beast in Revelation chapter 13, and notice their similarities. Finally, let's just note some last things about apocalyptic literature. So there are some that had we had time we would have looked at. We would have looked at Ezekiel chapter 1, for example, the glory of the Lord, the war wagon. We talked about that. It goes on, and I think it goes on into chapter 2. You can look at Ezekiel chapters 8 through 11, where we have a vision of the idolatry of Jerusalem. That's a pretty powerful vision as well. And then we have Ezekiel 37. This is one of the more famous ones out of the book of Ezekiel, the Valley of Dry Bones. We remember the dry bones, right? There's an old spiritual about this, the dry bones. And what you have is these dry bones that are in the valley. Are they just a little dry? They are exceedingly dry. They're really dry. In other words, they are really, really, really dead. Okay, not just a little dead, they're really dead. And what happens to them? They're brought back to life, but there's this whole process of that, this noise and this sound, and you can hear it in your minds as those bones are being brought back together, and then they grow sinew and tissue and all of that, and they live. What's that all about? What's the vision all about? Now, he's got the mic, so.
God's going to restore his people.
God's going to restore his people. So it's Israel that's being restored. Okay? They are dead in captivity, but they're going to come back. They're going to live again. That is also apocalyptic, pre-apocalyptic, okay, mildly apocalyptic, but it's still apocalyptic literature. All right. So one last little slide to share with y'all. These are the beasts of Daniel chapter 7, at least as illustrated by Hans Holbein the Younger. He's an artist. He does woodcuts, probably the 1400s, 1500s, okay, in Europe. And you can kind of visualize how he's visualizing those beasts. So you have the lion with wings, you have the bear, you have the leopard there. I'm sorry, I look at the leopard and I see a chicken. I see a giant chicken, okay? Two chicken legs and a bunch of chicken wings, and there's some leopard heads there. Even the back end of him looks like a chicken to me, at any rate. And then you have that fourth beast on the right. What is he about? What is that fourth beast? The one is just terrible. Okay, so you get illustrations from this, and look at the illustration in the background. What do you have in the background of these four beasts? Four winds. Okay, y'all all picked up on that. The four winds. Where are the beasts coming from? The sea. What kind of sea is that? It's a turbulent, choppy sea. Okay, you going to take your little rowboat out on the sea like that? Not unless you got a death wish. Okay, it's a turbulent sea. It's being blown on by the wind. And here come these four beasts. Now, look online just for fun, because we are visual people. Look online, do a Google search for the four beasts of Daniel chapter 7. And look at how many different ways it's illustrated. Okay, I've got several that I could share with y'all, but I liked this one because it's old and it shows how people have been visualizing this for a very long time, because apocalyptic literature just begs. No Stacy this morning? Oh, I was hoping Stacy was going to be here, because I could say it just begs to be painted. And in fact, a lot of people have done that. Okay? Yeah, it's like some kind of a little king or something there in his mouth. It's got a crown on. Okay? I guess that's how he illustrates the ribs. I don't know. It's kind of funny how he illustrates them. The chicken. I can't get over the chicken. Okay, very clearly chicken legs, bird legs. Okay, looks like a chicken to me. At any rate. All right. Any questions about any of that? Aaron, you got the mic.
Which of the not the intertestamental writings, the non-biblical, I lost the word. Not the pseudepigraphal. What's the other?
Not what?
Not the pseudepigraphal writings. What's the other? The writings during this period?
There's pseudepigraphal and apocryphal.
The apocryphal. Which of them are meant to be understood apocalyptically?
I can't pull it back up there because I rearranged it so we could go right into the next one. I think I gave a list. Yes, in the intertestamental period, 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, 2nd Baruch, 3rd Baruch, and the Apocalypse of Abraham are all considered apocalyptic. And those, by the way, don't show up in Catholic Old Testaments. Maybe, I don't know off the top of my head, maybe the Greek Orthodox Old Testament, but I don't think so. I don't think anybody has picked those up and thought that they were a part of the Old Testament. But they're all apocalyptic. But you can look for those online. I'm sure you'd be able to get the full text of them online without a problem.
It's correct to say that during that period, there's plenty of apocalyptic writing style still being used.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we see apocalyptic in the Bible, it's not like the Jews are looking at that and saying, wow, we've never seen literature like this before. In the Old Testament, it's beginning. I call Ezekiel and Daniel and Zechariah apocalyptic because they are. But they're apocalyptic at the kind of the beginning of when this is going to become very popular. It becomes very popular in the intertestamental period. And it reaches its zenith. See, I was looking for that word a couple of classes ago and couldn't find it. It reaches its zenith in Christian and Jewish contexts. There's pagan apocalyptic as well, but it doesn't reach that kind of zenith among them like it does among Christians and Jews. Both inspired and non-inspired. And then it kind of fades away until we get to America in the 21st century and the 20th century. Because we have guys like Hal Lindsey, who writes a book, The Great Late Planet Earth. And he's talking about end times, his view of end times. And then we have the Left Behind series that even I think some of those got turned into movies, didn't they? And that's really apocalyptic type literature as well, but it's being based on their interpretation of the book of Revelation. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. So we have, 5 minutes. Look at there. 5 minutes. See, I always try to have more material than less because I don't want to run out. Well, this time I'm going to run out of time, not material. All right, so two influential Jewish writers. There are two that are from this period that are influential. The first of those is Josephus, all right? I'm going to give you the short version. We're going to move very, very quickly, okay? His name was Yosef ben Matityahu, okay, which means Joseph, the son of Mattathias, a very Jewish name. He's born 37 AD in Jerusalem, so he is born after the time of Jesus, but definitely in the Christian period. He, however, is not Christian, all right? He is descended from the Maccabees. Remember these folks, right? Maccabees lead the rebellion against Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and they establish a dynasty. Thus, Josephus is from a priestly family, okay, because the Maccabees were priests. In 53 AD, at the ripe old age of 16, Josephus goes on a spiritual quest. He spends time with the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. All right, those are the three groups that are not necessarily political as such, but they're Jewish groups of the period. The fourth group would be the Zealots. He doesn't spend time with them. In 56 AD, at the age of 19, Joseph then decides to cast his lot with the Pharisees. That's who he's going to join up with. 62 to 63 AD, at the age of 26, he travels to Rome to appeal to Nero to release some priests who are imprisoned there. So he's now involved kind of politically with what's going on in Israel. In 65 AD, at the age of 28, just notice the young ages, okay? He returns to Judea to find that the Jews are on the edge of revolt, and indeed they are. The revolt starts in 66 AD. He's very old at this point in time. He's 29 years old. He's appointed commander of Galilee. He's appointed commander of Galilee at age 29. All right, so when they're looking for who's going to be in charge, here's Josephus. He's 29 years old. He's later present at the city of Yotapata under Roman siege. Okay, looking on with Josephus. At 67 AD, the city of Yotapata falls after 7 weeks of siege. Now what? Josephus clearly doesn't die. He escapes, but he fails to honor the suicide pact. Sound familiar? It's a lot like Masada later. All right, we're not going to fall into Roman hands. We're all going to commit suicide. After most are dead and have committed suicide, Josephus says, you know what? I'm going to rethink this whole suicide thing. Maybe, just maybe, I can convince the Romans that I'm not such a bad fellow and I might be worthwhile having around. And in fact, that's exactly what he does. He's captured by the Romans. He's retained by Vespasian as his hostage and interpreter. Needs somebody that can speak to these Jews who are in rebellion. Josephus, you can do that. We'll keep you around. He reportedly told Vespasian that the messianic prophecies actually applied to him. You, Vespasian, are the Messiah. That makes the future emperor pretty happy, who decides to keep him alive. Regardless of what happens, Josephus survives. There are not many people, guys. That was our first bell. There are not many people in history who managed to change sides entirely and completely and live to tell about it. Josephus does that. He's leading the garrison in Yotapata. He's supposed to die, but he doesn't. He's captured by the Romans, and instead of crucifying him, they say, hey, we're going to keep you around. It probably doesn't hurt that he tells Vespasian, we Jews have been looking for a Messiah, and you're the guy, okay? People like to hear things like that. Well, in 69 AD, Josephus is chosen very well, strictly from a human standpoint, he has. Because in 69 AD, Vespasian is proclaimed emperor. Josephus is freed. You're no longer my hostage. Hey, look, I'm the emperor now. Maybe that messianic prophecy thing was all right. And he ends up taking Vespasian's family name, which is Flavius. And so usually we know Josephus as Flavius Josephus, okay, because he takes that Roman name in honor of Vespasian's family. In 70 AD, Titus, who is Vespasian's son, captures the city of Jerusalem. Josephus tries to convince the inhabitants to surrender. However, his wife and his parents die in the siege. I want you to think about that for just a second. Josephus is helping the Romans. His wife and his parents are inside the city of Jerusalem. They die in the siege. He's not able to convince these Jews to surrender. In 71 AD, being the good turncoat that he is, Josephus is rewarded with land in Judea. Because you have faithfully served us, we're going to give you some land there. But he ends up moving to Rome, and he becomes a Roman citizen. Now, Got an idea why it might not have been a good place for him to live for very long in Judea? Lots of Jews, especially the ones that carried those daggers under their cloaks, well, the ones that are still alive, would have remembered this guy was a traitor. That's what we'd call him. He's a Benedict Arnold, okay? He changes sides in the middle of the war, and he's rewarded handsomely for doing that. Well, Josephus is most important for us. 75 AD, he receives a gift of more land. Josephus is most important for us because he records all of this. He writes about the Roman rebellion. Or in fact, the best source of information we have, the Jewish rebellion, about the Jewish rebellion is Josephus. Just like 1st and 2nd Maccabees are the best sources for the Maccabean revolt, this is the best source for the Jewish revolt. And he also writes a whole lot of books about the Old Testament. And I remember growing up in the church, people would say, what does Josephus say about this? And people would open their copies of Josephus and read what Josephus wrote about that. I will tell you that Josephus is a pretty good historian. He's a pretty good commentator. He, however, is not inspired.